tell you who he is because I don't want to get him in trouble. But I did stand up, and he heard that. It was the first he heard of it, and within a couple of months we had this letter laying out what advisory committees could spend their budget on and not, and making it very clear that it's not to be used for county services, for county administrative expenses. This is strictly for advisory committee expenses. And so let me talk to you a little bit about some of the creative things that you can do. Cindy gave you some great ideas, and I love her spunk and enthusiasm and not giving upness, not taking no for an answer, to figure out, she wants to do something, she figures out a way to do it. And that's, I want you all to walk out of here with that same kind of an idea of, okay, they told me no, now how am I going to get it done? Because that's what you want. So here's some things that people don't normally think about. I was the executive director of the public authority in Marin County, and a lady said, does the public authority ever do the budget? Well, it's whoever's providing your staffing services is going to assist you with it, okay? But there's rules about what can go in and what can't go in. First off, it's government money, so you can't spend this to go to Hawaii or, you know, on a cruise where you're going to have a seminar or something like that. That's not it. This is meant for your expenses to do your legally mandated job. And let me say, I like to remind folks who are on advisory committees, you are public officials. You are sworn public officials who have a public duty to discharge, and you're given a small budget to help you discharge that duty. But don't forget that you're public officials. That's very important. So when somebody tries to slough you off, you're not to be sloughed off. You've got a job to do. Okay, here's some creative things that you can use this money for that I think are and have been approved. I know they've been approved. Number one, computers, full computers with internet access, software, maintenance, everything else for everybody on your advisory committee. Okay? And here's a lady that has a sight impairment, okay? So you need to have a computer that's accessible to her, that has a reader on it, that has Dragon Naturally Speaking, whatever she needs. And it needs to be maintained. The county needs to either maintain it themselves or hire somebody to maintain it. Why is that? Well, because it's necessary for her to participate and do her job as an advisory committee member to be able to receive communications to and from people relating to advisory committee business. This is not a computer for her personal use. This is not a computer for her to use to surf the internet for whatever she wants or something like that. Just as other county officials, and there are plenty of them in your county, I don't care how small it is, there are county officials who have computers at home, and they have an agreement that they sign that we understand this is a county computer and that there's, you know, we can't use this in any way that we wouldn't be able to use our computer at work in the office. We can't look up pornography, we can't gamble with it, you know, that kind of stuff. But they're public officials when they're working at home. You're a public official when you're working at home. And the state has approved, whenever anybody's asked for that, the state's approved it. Now, the counties don't approve it. There's a lot of county resistance to that because they say, well, that's a gift of public funds. The answer is no, it's not a gift of public funds. You're not giving the computer to that person. This computer still belongs to the advisory committee, and when that person's off the advisory committee, they need to give it back. That's the deal. That's what you sign on that computer usage agreement. Here's another one that people aren't aware of. If you have a disability, they have to make reasonable accommodations for you to be able to fully perform your functions with that disability. Whatever it takes, okay? So if you need an attendant to be able to go to a meeting, you don't have to take your attendant and use your IHSS hours because IHSS is in-home supportive services. That attendant's got, your assessment is based on the hours that attendant has to put in at your house. If you go outside to a function for your advisory committee, then, or go to an advisory committee meeting and you need an attendant, the advisory committee budget, that's one of the things that it can pay for. And that's perfectly legal. So that's totally taken care of. But not at the IHSS rate, but at whatever the going public rate is for an hourly rate for an attendant. Also, if you, I mean, let's just say you're a homebound person and you never leave, but you have to have some special preparations in order to get to the meeting, whatever that is. That's appropriate. If you need transportation to a CICA conference and you have to have specialized transportation, they can pay for that. You know, that's appropriate use of that advisory committee money. You're also allowed to receive compensation for the mileage that you travel to get to advisory committee meetings. Those are some other things that the money is appropriately used for. So here's what I'm saying. This is the overall point I want to make. This money doesn't belong to the county. It's not the county's money. It's not the public authority's money. It's your money. But you do have to follow rules because it's public money also. It's taxpayer money. So you have to spend it wisely and within the guidelines that the state and the federal government set out, because this is federal Medicaid money as well. So there's federal rules about it. And generally what happens, like Cindy said, is if you have a fair and reasonable budget that's basically following what your guidelines, what, you know, using it for your business, to do what you need to do in your business, you're not going to get any guff from the Board of Supervisors, and if you do get some from the county, you know, because they ultimately have to approve it. The Board of Supervisors is ultimately responsible for this money. Yes, it's meant for advisory committee expenses. The county has to advance the money. Then at the end of the year, they make a claim for it, and the state gives it back to them. But they still have to pay it out of their pocket, and it's their job to make sure that it's spent for appropriate things. Like I say, not on junkets and stuff. But here's another one. Suppose you got a person who's a diabetic or something else that comes to your meetings that has to eat meals every once in a while. It's perfectly appropriate to have nutritious snacks at your meetings. I'm not talking about having big lunch, fancy catered lunches and stuff like that, but it's, you know, they say, oh, we can't do that. We don't do that anywhere else in the county. Well, that's a reasonable accommodation for those folks who actually need that. And, you know, if you don't need it, then you don't need it. But when they try and make it hard for folks with disabilities to do their job, that's a red flag for you to say, wait a minute, I think that I might be entitled to that under this thing, whatever I need in order to be able to do my job. And let them know. Say, I'm a public official, and I need this for a reasonable accommodation. You know the funny thing that happens when you say that word, reasonable accommodation, or those two words? People start thinking, boo-boo, ADA, lawsuits, and all that sort of thing. You're probably going to get it if you tell them you need it for a reasonable accommodation, because they're going to back down. I had a question. He said a couple of things there. Can we get a printout of how the money's been spent? He also said whatever's not spent goes back to the public authority. Okay, does that raise any red flags for anybody? Right. Okay. Number one, you will find in counties where they've been spending the money for county purposes that they absolutely do not want to give you any information about that. Okay? So you don't even have to have an advisory committee resolution. Suppose you've got a county where they say, no, we're not going to let you put that on the agenda. You're not going to be able to ask for that resolution. Guess what? Those are public records. Okay? There's a California Public Records Act. And you can very simply, do it in writing, very simply give to the county or the finance people in the county or the director of the Department of Social Services or whatever, say, I would like these public records. I want a printout of how the advisory committee money has been spent in the last year, what it's been spent on. They have to give you that, okay? But on a more sort of gentle basis, I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to say, we would like